All right, we're ready to go. This is the Brainerd City Council Budget Workshop. It's November 28th at 6 p.m. I call the meeting to order and ask Administrator Bergman to please call the roll.
Johnson.
Here.
Beezer.
Here.
Stenglein. Here. Erickson.
Here.
O'Day.
Here.
Stunek.
Here.
Bevins.
Here.
And Badeau.
Here. We have one item on the agenda this evening. That's the 2023 budget and levy. Connie Hillman, are you going to start us out? All right, our Finance Director Hillman.
All right. So how does the city of Brainerd budget? We estimate all of our non-tax revenues, our fees, our fines, LGA. We estimate all of our expenditures, personnel costs, supplies, services, the amount needed for debt as well as capital. And the difference between the two is the levy needed. And per the League of Minnesota Cities handbook, budgeting is basically planning and prioritizing goals for the coming year based on experiences in the past year or year. Tonight's discussion is going to be on the working funds, the general public safety, parks and streets, as well as debt and capital. These are the funds that the city needs to levy for operation. The preliminary levy was certified to the county prior to the deadline of September 30th at $6,852,566. This is a 9.5% increase over the 2022 levy. And then as a reminder, the final levy needs to be certified to the county by December 28th. The final levy can be lower, but could not be higher than what was certified in September. So if we look at our operating expenditures and we look at personnel, the difference between the September budget and where we are today has a decrease in personnel services of $228. We still have an estimate in the budget for settlement of the two 49ers unions and the IBEW Admin Support Union. Wages have been updated for the 10 employees moving to step 7 or 8 based on preliminary information from the 2021-2022 review process. We have updated health insurance for the 2023 open enrollment for their preliminary elections and their changes. We have updated, and the total budget includes the actual 2023 health insurance rates for all plans. We have 4 different plans and it includes all the actual renewal rates. So that's what the difference between there. However, we do have a significant increase of about $300,000 over the 2022 budget. And so just as a reminder, we are budgeting for 25.5 sworn officers, even though we're planning on being at 27 officers. The current staffing is 25. We have no new full-time positions, but we are assuming that the 2 open positions for the assistant planner and the engineering tech will be filled in 2023. And temporary employees have been reduced from the 2023 budget for election staff and temporary employee for ITGIS. We're going down from 2 to 1. Assumes any new employee will elect the 3,000 family plan option for health insurance. And then we don't have our League of Minnesota Cities renewal rates for workers' comp, but they were suggesting a 10 to 15% rate increase. The current budget includes a 10% rate increase and changed our experience mod from 0.71 in 2022 to 0.8. This renews, we will know probably first part of January what our workers' comp will actually be. If we look at our supplies, there was no difference between the preliminary levy or budget and where we are now. However, we did have a $93,000 increase over the 2022 budget. So as a reminder, this was an increase to repairs and maintenance line item, as well as an increase in motor fuels. If you recall, we were over budget already in July for 2022. So we have a significant increase in our budgets for motor fuels. If we look at our services, the services between now and September have increased by $37,338. And we have reviewed the expenditure line items. We've updated for contracts that were recently settled, such as the misdemeanor prosecutor, the health insurance broker, and the YMCA estimates needed to be updated, and the animal control contract. We've increased the pass-through to the fire relief of the fire state aid to the Relief Association based on amount collected in 2022. And we've updated estimates for property and casualty insurance with information received from the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust However, we do not have a contingency for the increase in property values, and that makes me a little bit nervous, but who knows what the property values are going to increase and the exact impact at this point. And that insurance premium plan does not renew until March 1st. So if we look at our services and we look at the difference between where we are now and the 2022 budget, just as a reminder, assumes the city will continue to lease vehicles, includes services for the wage comp study that we've been saving for in the capital fund, and that will be reflected in the transfers in line item. It includes funds for codifications and an increase in audit services for the new lease standards, as well as just increase in personnel services. Yes?
Question, Connie, on the codification thing that was pitched by staff in a workshop has never been discussed or ordered at the council level. Just because you pitched an idea in a workshop and got no direction, I don't think it should necessarily be included in the budget.
Okay, should we bring it to formal council action on December 5th?
Well, I think before you spend the money, at least, you should ask
Right.
the council if you're allowed to, maybe,
Correct.
you know?
Good point. You want to just give us a 5-minute explanation right now as to what that is?
It is, Jennifer Bergman?
Yes?
Yep, Mr. President, I can. With the updates to the charter and the updates to the employee policy manual, our city code is significantly, it needs an update. It also, we have found several things over the last few years that it'll say one thing in one part of the code and another thing in the other part of the code. I don't remember the last time, or I don't know the last time that our city code has ever been updated. And so the recommendation when we had our workshop was that we would like to take a look at our code in 2023 and update it based on the changes to the charter, the changes to the employee policy manual, and then just in general get rid of the inconsistencies kind of from cover to cover on that city code. My understanding from the direction of the council, not direction, the discussion from the council, that was something that the council was interested in having us move forward. Tony had reached out just to see if there were companies and what they would charge, and those estimates is what we put into the 2023 budget.
Which was how much?
I want to say 20 or
25.
25,000.
25,000.
Okay. Gabe?
I think the city council should authorize all expenditures of the city. We didn't authorize this just because somebody feels that it was authorized. Doesn't mean that
good
there's
point.
action that authorized it,
We'll
you know?
bring it up on the 5th.
We'll do that, thank you.
Keep going. Thank you, Gabe.
Right. We also have an increase of, in computer support of $33,000 for BCEA, audit mandates, body worn camera support, and scheduling software for the police department. Those were all things that were included in September as well. So our operating expenditures increased $632,640. If we look at our capital needs, there's no difference between the budget in September, where we are today, as well as the difference in the 2022 budget. We will look at the different price of the items and the different items that are budgeted to be purchased in 2023. If we look at our debt, we do have an increase of $50,000 from September and a $119,000 increase over the 2022 levy. This includes $100,000 to structure the 2023 debt levy for road construction projects. And the current debt levy assumes a 10-year repayment schedule to BPU and paying half of the League of Minnesota City and Trust loan interest-free in 2023. The plan would be then in 2025 to be able to repay the BPU loan double after the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust loan is paid off in 2024. This would shorten the term as well as it would reduce the cost of interest to be paid on the debt to pay for the IFF lawsuit. Then we have our other levies. There's no difference between now and September. And just a reminder that this is the first year that the charter levies are based off of previous year's levy rather than the mill rate. The library requested a 2% increase, and the EDA requested the maximum allowed by state statute. So if we look at all of our expenditure items and put them all together, Our operating expenditures increased $672,414 over the 2022 adopted budget, or a 4.65% increase. Now, if we take a look at our revenues, total revenues have increased $66,217 from September. And this is a review of the line items based on actual revenue received, a 10% admin fee to Baxter and Nisswa, and an increase in police and fire state aid amounts received from the state that we got the end of September. And just again, to look over the revenues, the difference between the 2022 and the where we are currently, we did decrease building permit revenue by $50,000 from the 2022 budget. Staff had preliminary recommended a decrease of $100,000, but when we met with PNF Chair Johnson and Council President Bevins, they suggested adding $50,000 back in for the grants, through the Deed Foundation,
Main Street.
thank you, Main Street grants, and just to add more revenue into the budget. This, there we go. Revenues from other government include the LGA certification at $4,695,588. This is an increase of over $80,000 or 1.71%. We also assumed that all crypto companies would be mining all year, and so therefore we would get additional revenue from BPU based on our current agreement with them, which I don't know if we will get that or not. And then we see an increase of transfers in. We're planning for the comp study in the capital fund, so now we're transferring the money to the general fund. So when we look at our preliminary levy, we needed a 5.54% increase for an operating budget. As of today, we need a 5.88%. A reminder, the preliminary levy was set at 9.54% increase, and that was because we needed to fund for the lawsuit, and we had $250,000 that was unfunded back in September when we met. So that's how we got to the preliminary levy of 9.54% increase. Since September, the council has closed out bond funds in the amount of $83,900 and transferred the money into the general fund. The EDA and the council has also authorized the sale of the industrial park land to VCV to also go into the general fund, and that's estimated to be $227,815. Now, the concern is that VCV still has not closed. That still has not been completed yet. We've been asking for a closing date, and we have not got one yet, so I think we need to be aware of the timing factor when using those funds. So that total was more than $250,000, and so staff did assume a reduction to the amount of fund balance that we need, and we'll talk about that a little later. And so that gets us to the $6,623,459 levy, or a 5.88% increase over 2022. So we look at our preliminary proposed capital for 2023. You can see that we removed the phone system as well as the annex. The phone system is being completed actually this year for less than $60,000 that was in the budget. And the annex, the $60,000 that we had now and the $140,000 that was in the 2022 budget has all been moved to 2027. We did realize today that the security cameras were doubled up both in IT and the street garage, so we have removed them for the street garage and left them in IT. However, the lease accounting software, this was approved at the September 19th council meeting. It hasn't been purchased yet, so I thought we'd take that $15,000 and put it in the budget for 2023 because that's more than likely when the expense is going to occur. If we continue to look at parks and streets, because it all won't fit on one page, you can see that parks significantly decreased their ask. It was, they decreased it by $380,000. We also have our revenues that we try to budget in our capital plan too, are at $108,600. So the preliminary levy was a net of $1,873,082, and now it's a net of $974,500. And that does include the $300,000 that the council operated in, or allocated to the 2023 proposed capital for ARPA. When meeting with Council President Bevins and PNF chairs, they would like to have discussion on the individual line items on the capital list for 2023. Specifically, they would like to remove the $400,000 from the parks request. leaving $167,500 for parks plus the ARPA funds that were allocated. I think that I would like to take a moment to ask Public Works Director Dean and possibly the mayor to share some of the public work or the park board's thoughts when they reduce the 2023 capital.
Mr. President, can I
Yep,
speak
absolutely.
before? So we didn't necessarily say we wanted to have council discussion on whether to remove the 400. I think Council President and myself were of the opinion that the 400 should be removed and there should be a council discussion on, do we need lighted softball fields in the city of Brainerd? When should we be funding these lighted softball fields for the region to be able to play softball after the sun sets? And what is the real cost to install new lighting in 3 fields? Because 400 is just a number that was kind of thrown up against the fridge. So we can have discussion about whether we remove it or not, but I think the real discussion would take place tonight or at a later time of what's the future of softball in the city of Brainerd? And do we invest what will probably be $600,000 to $800,000 in lights for 60 people to play a softball game after dark every once in a while?
Thank you. Jesse, you want to start us off with giving your thoughts? And then-
Yes, sir, Mr. President and Council. Just to clarify, at the last park board meeting, the park board wanted to prioritize Memorial Park lights because they understood the ask that they had preliminary was a large ask. So they wanted to prioritize the lights, and they felt that some of the other items could be done at a future date after some more future planning was done. But they felt that Memorial Park lights was something that was high on their priority list to get replaced. The $400,000 came from a budgetary estimate from one of the, I guess, more standard vendors that does these, and most likely one of the 2 bidders, should that go out to bid. They priced it at $380 in 2022 dollars. So putting a modest bump for inflation, we were putting together about a $400,000 number for 2023. So that's where that number comes from. But the park board did feel that that was more of a priority now to get that addressed versus the other items. If the council does wish to remove the Memorial Park lights, I think the park board would like the opportunity, if the council so wishes, to allow them to discuss if they were not able to have the Memorial Park lights as part of the capital, if they could change the ask for some of the other items back in.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor,
So,
our park board liaison.
yeah, park board liaison. Yeah, it's an interesting discussion. So, the initial ask from the Parks Department was very high. And so I think what they did then was go in and say, all right, we need to start reducing this. The lights popped up late in this procedure, which is something the council has been pretty clear about not wanting to see. And so I've spoke even in their meetings about the same thing, is that the council's been pretty clear that you're not interested in seeing items pop up in August that need to be funded the next year. That's exactly what's happened here. And so you see them then kind of scrambling to see what can we remove. I will say that the items that they removed, it was all of the idea of they're going through this park master plan process. They're going through each park and figuring out what they want, what they don't want, what the vision is. And the idea being that because Jesse is new, we can take a year, kind of step back, not move forward with a few of these projects, and then that'll give us a little bit of leeway and room. They are asking for the lights. They feel strongly about the lights. Evidently, the lights don't work. But it does put you in a precarious situation because you've been pretty clear about what your direction is in terms of what you're looking for budgetary items year to year, but also with the ask of removing items. So it's a tough one. That's the item they selected. They kind of put their stake in the ground that that's what they're interested in. And I think this is why the council has that check and balance over top, is they set their budget, the council then approves their budget. It's just a part of the process, so.
Okay. Mr. O'Day.
My thoughts on this, last time we had a budget workshop, I was asking about this item because it took me by surprise. I would like to ask the park board to go back and look at all other options for something like this. There's in my head, I can't wrap my head around the fact that you can't refurbish these lights. They're big giant metal poles. If we needed to paint them, paint them. If you need to run new wires and put new light housing in them, replace it. I don't understand why we would have to spend $400,000 on a single item when we have a lot of other items that we need to cover in our parks. So I fully support taking this off. I know we're not making formal action tonight, but that's what I would direct Park Board to do, is just take another look at this. See if we can make these things work. Because if the excuse is, sorry, that makes it so we don't have a, what was it, a warranty on the lights anymore, well, you're already there. We don't have a warranty right now. So let's get some more years out of them.
Okay.
Mr.
Any
President?
other thoughts on the light? Again, this is a workshop, so we're not going to vote on anything, but this is
Mr.
a
President?
suggestion. Chief Stunek,
Correct me if I'm wrong, Jesse. Softball starts at 6:30 or 6? I believe it's 6:30.
I believe it's 6:30.
So maybe we take a look at adjusting the time start to 6. And softball, and I watch softball, and I played a lot of softball and stuff. The softball teams, from what I remember and think, have dwindled as far as the numbers, as far as teams. So if we adjust the start time from 6:30 to 6, that buys us more time on the end, which maybe then we can readjust what we do with the lights. Just a thought. Because true softball players, they're there at 5:30, 5:15 warming up anyway. So start the games at 6. You buy another half hour on the back end, which maybe would solve our problem with the lights.
thank you. Any other comments on the lights?
Mr. President, just to clarify the one
Jesse.
piece with the
Yes.
other options. So we did look at a few different other ways to do the lights. One of the other options the park board talked about was putting LED on the existing poles and kind of doing a retrofit. The cost of that was about $320. While it is less, even the warranty period got chopped more in half compared to the new poles. It was based on some of those discussions that they wanted to do the $400,000 option of full replacement rather than the retrofit.
Thank you. Mr. O'Day?
If that's the case about the cost of how much these lights actually are, at what point does it become non-feasible for a city our size to have lights on a softball field? And I think that's probably where you guys got on this discussion already. And that's where I'm sitting. At what point does it not make sense anymore for us to have lights on the softball field? Do they need to cost $1 million? I don't know. There's a lot of daytime that those fields aren't getting used.
Any other comments on the softball lights? Okay, the suggestion by Chairman Johnson and myself is to eliminate that 400,000. So we're going to vote on it, not tonight, but soon. You've heard some arguments for and against. From my perspective, I'm not 100% sure we need them at all. For some reason, the park board is particularly stuck on that we do need them. I might argue that very few citizens of Brainerd benefit from that. But the people who play softball certainly do if they want to play at night, but I'm not sure they have to. Not sure, as Mr. O'Day said, that there's not other alternatives that we can play softball at night after dark if we have to. But I'm not sure that we have to, and I'm not sure that it benefits the city as a whole. I also think as Gabe Johnson said, the procedure could be done a little bit better. Or a lot better. So the other thing is we need to cut some money out of this budget. We have a firefighters lawsuit that we know we're funding, and if we can reduce the levy from the preliminary levy, and this is one of the obvious things of question in my mind. So I'm not saying that lights aren't going to come back for discussion, but I think for now, the city is better off not funding them. So, Connie, you want to continue?
So for the rest of the discussion tonight, the lights are in the budget, just to simplify what was passed out and where we are at, because I don't know when the lights would move to what year if the park board takes them out, for example. Or if we tell the park board they're not being funded, or the council tells the park board how it's gonna be funded.
Direction, the city charter says that we direct the budget.
Now, Gabe just brought up a point. Can you say that out loud, Gabe?
I said the direction was to remove them when we met last week, and the city charter clearly says the council president, chair of personnel finance, and the city administrator will sit down and get the budget to be presented to the council. And the budget we had put together last week did not include $400,000 for lights, so I'm disappointed that that's the budget being presented right now.
Okay, I apologize, that is not what I understood. I thought it was discussion and to leave them in there, and it was gonna be discussion tonight of the individual items on the capital plan. That's what I thought.
I agree with
apologize.
Mr. Johnson. I think as far as the budget we're presenting, they're not in there.
Okay, so then if I would move it, this would include the fire, this just shows the plan, shows the levy staying the same. It shows the 1,083,100. Basically, it would have been moved to 24, 25. As you can see, we have a significant increase in the capital items because things have been pushed from 2022 or 2023 to 2024. So that would just increase the amount even more than in 24 or 25. But it does show that if we include all, including the fire capital equipment, that we are funded our plan. If we don't include the fire capital when we look at this funding, because we do keep them separate because they're funded through the Fire Advisory Board, but if we include them all, then we show that our plan is funded. So really, it's not gonna affect the levy amount, because the levy at this point is still staying the same. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. So if you look at a recap right now, we're at the 5.88. And one of the big things that we want to do is to keep our levy to avoid peaks and valleys. What that levy amount should be, I don't know. But one of the things that we talked about when we met was currently our 2022 levy was the $6,255,000. We're currently at 5.88% increase. If the council chooses to decrease the levy to a different amount, the amount on the right would be what we'd have to reduce by. And when we met last week, P&F Chair Johnson and Council President Bevins suggested a final levy of 3%. And that would mean that we would need to cut about an additional $180,000 from the budget to have a balanced budget in 2023. In the memo that was sent out on Wednesday, staff listed 3 possible ways to adjust the budget if they choose to lower the budget to the final levy, or a combination may be used. One of them was to keep the estimated use of fund balance from the lawsuit an estimated amount of $250,000. If you recall, the $250,000 was the amount going from 39% to 37%. The con of this is that we don't know how 22 will turn out yet. We went from 42% to 39% last year. And will the city be within the fund balance? Plus, we don't know the timing. There's no word on when the settlement will need to be paid, but the settlement will be recognized in 2022. That means that we could already fall out of compliance with our fund balance policy because we do not want to take out loans until we absolutely have to. And so we met with our bond rating. We explained this to them. We will get our updated bond rating the end of next week, I do believe. And we talked about how we don't want to take the loans out. And so we might see a significant decrease in 2022 to have a recovery when we take out the loans in 2023 once we learn when the settlement is to be paid. We also need to keep in mind of the closing the property to VCV in case the $227,000 doesn't come through. So basically, if we reduce the amount by keeping it at $250,000 rather than the reduction of $188,000 to $85,000, there's a potential reduction to the levy of $61,715. It would take the levy from 5.88 to 4.89%. Another way we could do it is we could lower the debt levy, use prepayments, assessments to lower the levy, or change the repayment structure on the BPU and League of Minnesota Cities loans. The con of this is that we have $100,000 in the debt structure for the 2023 road projects. But when we estimate the actual repayment, it's gonna be about $250,000 to $300,000 to make future debt payments. So would the levy of $920,000 be enough, and could we use prepayments to better, to be better in another year. We could transfer funds from the capital fund to the general fund. The city's fund balance policy, if we are within the range of 35 to 50%, the range can only be increased 1% each year, and any additional funds would be transferred to the capital fund for equipment and facilities. So the amounts transferred in the last 5 years were included in the memo that was sent out on Wednesday. The con of this is the city would need to include the fire capital fund to have a positive cash flow in the capital plan. We do not know the results of the Park Board Master Plan is not included in the plan at this point, and there are no costs for inflation currently built into the capital plan, either increasing our levy or for increase in cost. However, if we would do that, so this has the $400,000 for the lights in 2023, we would do the transfer out to get our levy down to 3%. And we would see that if we don't include the fire, that we go negative in 26 and 27. But if we include the fire capital, then we are positive. And then what years would the lights be budgeted and at what cost? So that would just be something else to put in here to see how it would all flow. So if we would look at the recap, we would increase our transfers in, and we would have a budget levy of 3% increase over the 2022 levy. So we had a levy in 2024 and a tax rate of 70.911%. So if we change the levy to 9.54%, this was the preliminary levy that was sent out to all the taxpayers, all the tax statements they should be receiving soon. That would be an estimated tax rate of 62.237% calculated by the county. This was the preliminary levy. Where we currently are right now is at the 5.88. It's a calculated tax rate of 60.172%. And if the council choose to lower the levy to a 3% increase, that would be a estimated 58.536% tax levy. Keep in mind that the city council does not set the tax rate. The tax rate is a result of the levy amount that is set by the council and the total tax capacity of the city. So of course I like my little flow chart. And so if the city's levy, which is AKA the city's income or the revenue, if that stays the same and the tax capacity increases, the tax rate decreases. So we looked at the estimated market value and the tax capacity of the city for the last couple of years. We've seen a modest increase, but the preliminary 2023 shows a 22% change in our estimated market value, which equates to almost a 25% increase in the city's tax capacity. That is a huge increase. But that explains why we can have an almost 10% increase in the levy and have a decrease in our tax rate. If we look at the breakdown of the property taxes listed by residential, commercial, industrial, and other property, we'll use this 24% increase and this 17.2% increase in a little bit to see the impact to our residential and commercial properties. So a residential property owner who had an estimated market value of $140,000 in 2022 paid a city tax liability of $818 in city tax liability. If we assume a 24% increase, the estimated market value for pay year 2023 would be $173,600. Whatever levy the council would choose, they would see an increase in their tax levy. And their preliminary tax statement would show a $128 increase in their city tax liability. By going down to the 5.88, it would save the taxpayer about $31.38 a year. A further reduction would be an additional $25 a year in city property taxes. For residential property owners, I really don't have any good news for them. This year, even if there was no change in the levy and they had a 24% increase in their estimated market value, they would see a $45 increase in the city tax liability for 2023. If we look at a commercial property owner in 2022, if they had an estimated market value of $363,500, they would have paid a city tax liability of $4,623 in city tax liability. Assuming an increased market value of 17.2%, they would have an estimated market value of $426,022. The preliminary tax statement would show that they had an increase of $213 in taxes. By reducing it to 5.88, It's a decrease of about $160 in city tax liability for a year. Reducing it to 3% would be an additional $127 in city tax liability. If there was no change on the tax liability, but they had the market increase of 17.2, they would see a decrease in their city tax liability of about $208 a year. So the next step, staff will have the 2023 capital on the December 5th or December 19th meeting for formal action on the Memorial Park lights. Is the park board allowed to be heard, or can they add back some of the capital items if the council chooses to reduce it? I think that's one question that we have. Another question we have is a public hearing is scheduled for December 12th at 7:30 p.m. in the council chambers. What levy percentage increase should be used? And do we need formal action at the December 5th council meeting to say this is what we want to use for the preliminary public hearing? Again, the final levy can be set after the public hearing or at the December 9th regular scheduled council meeting. So now we're looking for council discussion and direction to staff. Based on those questions, I think that's where we're at.
Any questions of Connie? Regarding the park board, the public hearing is the 12th. So I think if they have something they wish to say, they should say it at the December 5th meeting. And I think that's acceptable. I really wish they would present it in writing before the packets go out. I see no reason why they can't do that.
I don't believe the park board meets as a whole until December 6th.
Well, I don't know what else to say. Do you want them to come to the public hearing and join in with the public hearing? I mean, generally, that's not where we work out in-house issues. They can have a special meeting, is what I'm trying to say, or not. They don't have to come and talk. But if they want to, I think they have to on the 5th. Don't you? Anybody disagree? And if they choose not to have a meeting beforehand, so be it. So, this packet has been out since when, Gabe? Friday?
Thursday, Friday, yeah.
Thursday, well, Thursday being Thanksgiving, Friday. They could have had a special meeting today. They could have been here tonight. Yes? Okay, they chose not to. The 5th it is. On the regular agenda, please. What's that? Yeah, on the full council agenda.
Full council?
Yep.
Okay.
Gabe, do you want to vote on that $400, or are you just gonna leave it as it's not in there? That's the way I took it Wednesday.
Yeah, Mr. President, the way I took it Wednesday is what was going to be presented to the council tonight is where the budget is at right now is without the 400, including the transfer into from capital into general, and a 3% levy increase. We could have presented other options with it, but per the City of Brainerd Charter, which I guess we follow sometimes and not other times, what we talked about last Wednesday is what should have been presented tonight.
So that was what should be on the agenda on the 5th. It's just as Gabe described, because that's the way I also understand it.
Okay. I guess I thought that the full council should be able to weigh in before we say this is the budget. And I thought that we did present, this would be the 3%. I don't know when the lights would have to be moved. What year do I move the lights into? 2024, 2025, 2026?
Why do we have to move it all right now?
Or do I just take it out completely?
I think it's out completely for now. You know, I'm not actually sure what would be on the agenda the 5th. We're not voting on a budget.
I would
No,
say,
we'll do that on the
The
19th.
only thing that should be on the 5th is if the park board wishes to present. Otherwise, I don't know. We've had an opportunity to discuss the lights this evening. I believe the budget
so is
is
the,
as Mr. Johnson just presented. I don't know that there needs to be another budget item on the 5th unless the park board requests it. I really don't. What are we gonna do?
Okay, so would P&F Chair and Council President, you just want it completely out of the budget? You don't want the 400,000 anywhere, and we shouldn't plan on funding it for the next 10 years, is what I'm hearing.
Well, you can throw it in 2034. It doesn't matter. You throw it in 2025 or not. We don't want it in 2023. And we need to commit to have a conversation with ourselves and the park board on how economical is it for us to light up softball fields in the year 2023.
And the reason why I left it in there is for full council discussion and to have it be funding the long-term cash flow. That's my mistake then. But I feel I did present that the current levy at 3% based on our discussion on Wednesday.
That was one of 3 options you presented, yes.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, so 2 things. One, I want to commend the park board in their budgeting process. They've worlds beyond where we were 4 years ago when I took that on. Worlds beyond. But you have been consistent, and that's the main thing that I ask is consistency. I don't care what the park board spends their money on. I've said that. That's not my job, is to pick what they spend it on, what they don't spend it on. But you have been consistent about saying if you're going to bring these items, there has to be a system in which we're bringing these items along and we're not just popping things up. And that's what's happened here, and that's why we're in the situation that we're in. They did a great job of pushing the other items back a year because they said that they're not quite ready. Let's give Jesse an opportunity. So they've done a very good job. But the lights, it's contentious, and this is what happens when we bring forward items at the last minute. It becomes contentious because the goal of the job of the council is to check off on those boxes, and if they haven't seen it, that's going to pop up. And so I don't think you're being inconsistent at all. Obviously, it's going to be a conversation that needs to be had. The one thing I would like to see us get to at some point is a general concept for the park board as to what kind of dollar amount you're looking at year to year, because we seem to be all over the place. And we've been, and that's partially their fault, is there's just been these swings up and down, up and down.
Only up.
Oh, up. It's kind of a roller coaster system where the down doesn't quite slide. The down doesn't quite slide. There's a lot of up. But it would be nice to get to a point where there's a pretty steady dollar amount, and then that way they can be plugging things in as they go. But again, giving that idea that it's not surprising to me that the council is a little off-put by an item showing up for $400,000 in August that they want for next year, because you've been pretty consistent about that.
Well, that's our job.
You know, I think the mayor just answered your question, Connie. It's really going to be the park board that's going to tell us where they should be, not the council. Okay? So what I'm hearing here and here is that the park board needs to step back on the well, the lights are maybe a bad example, but on their entire budget and say this is what we want when we want it. I have to be truthful on the lights. I'm a little bit concerned that we need them at all. I'm also not on the park board, but I would really, if those lights are going to show up in the future, I personally would like to hear a presentation as to why. First of all, confirm the 400 grand, because I don't think 400 is close. I think it's half. Second, I would like to know when and why. And I would kind of like to know that on everything. I mean, maybe not reams of paper, or stuff like that. But on lawnmowers, anything that's of consequence financially. And I would like the lights out for 2023. So I don't know that I would presume our park board liaison will tell us when they need to go back in, when they present their plan to level out their capital for the next 10 years, minimum. That's why they're doing these master planning, otherwise why do it? So does that make sense? I don't think it's fair if Gabe Johnson says, well, put the lights in 34.
Well, it just said it's
That was
inconsequential.
kind of funny.
Again, I was just concerned of removing them completely or somehow cash flowing our plan, because that's the other reason why we have this 30-year capital plan, is to show whether or not we can fund it. So that was my concern. I felt if I was just taking them out, that it was just gone completely. And then next year when we look at it, well, you guys can say, when we looked at this in December, it wasn't in 2024, and now you're asking for it in 2024. This just came up out of the blue. No, these lights have been discussed, and we know how it comes up. So that That was
Yep.
why I had them in there. So for the budget public hearing, do we want to use the 5.88 or the 3% as recommended by Council President Bevins and PNF Chair
Do we
Johnson?
follow the charter or do we not follow?
3%.
Okay,
Yes? Yes. Okay. That's our budget that we presented.
okay.
Okay. Any other questions, discussions on the lights that you think we haven't had?
Lights are gone.
They are
They're going to come
gone.
up out of the blue next year.
Oh, they're
That's
gone.
fine, but they can come up right now for
They
next
have been illuminated right now. You've, the
They're out.
pun intended.
I just want to say one thing.
Yeah, Mr.
again.
O'Day.
We still funded how many other projects for the parks next year through our ARPA funds? This is just one thing that came up. If there's a year where you have a lawsuit you're gonna have to pay off, as a city, where is that money most likely to come from? Probably parks improvements. And this one just came up. It just makes more sense to take it off. And they're still going to be improving parks. The campground, I think it's the beach, and Kiwanis clearing, and there was one more big one, JC's.
Priority number one.
Yeah,
So
Gregory
it's not
Park
like we're not
Fall.
funding our parks.
312.
This is just where it needs to come from.
Amen.
Any other comments on the budget? Then we are adjourning this. To anything in particular?
Regular meetings?
It's the next scheduled regular meeting. EDA meets at 7:30 on Thursday. That'll be fun. And we're adjourned.